Hi friends, Krista here. Thanks for stopping by Books and Jams. I'm so excited to talk to you today about all the books that I read in the month of September. September was a huge reading month for me. I completed 20 books during the month. But don't worry, we're not talking about 20 books today. That would be way too long of a video. And I've already talked about quite a few of these. So the first 8, I'm just going to show you them. I did talk about these in a mid-month wrap-up. I will have that linked down below if you're interested in a little bit more of my thoughts about these 8. There's no order to these, but these are the books that I read in the first half of the month. So we have Buried in a Good Book, A Cozy Mystery by Tamara Berry. Really enjoyed that. It was super fun. Middle grade, part of a series, The Black Cauldron. It's book 2 in the Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander. Was okay. Finished a series with The Winter House Mysteries by Ben Gooderson. A lot darker of a series than I thought when I first started it, but I did finish it and glad that I did. What I thought was the finish of a series, The Final Gambit by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, but just this fall, I think it was this fall or the summer, a fourth book came out, The Brothers Hawthorne. So I got one book closer to finishing that series. An older Christian fiction series that I had started a really long time ago. This is The Piper's Pursuit. I think it's book 9 or 10 in the series by Melanie Dickerson. Fairy tale retellings. Obviously, this one is a little bit of the Pied Piper. Enjoyed it very much. Did complete a series with Empty Smiles by Catherine Arden. Creepy clown. Very creepy series. Almost caught up with another series with the Vanderbeekers on the road. There's one more that did just come out recently, and it's actually on hold at my library, coming in very soon. And then I also read Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins Valdez at the beginning of the month and loved this one. Some of those really need to get back to the library. Okay, let me just move these out of the way. Then I have 4 books that I've read as part of my Read Like a BookTube Friend project, and I don't typically talk about those books in my monthly TBRs and wrap-ups, so I will just show you the 3 books that I read like Lindsay. The Life We Bury I actually read in August, but then in September I read The Last Flight by Julie Clark and Plain Truth by Jodi Picoult. I will put the link to my Read Like Lindsay video in the description below if you want my thoughts on those ones. I'm loving this project. Then I did in September read one book like Mitzi. Mitzi is who I picked for September, and I'm a little behind, obviously, but I did read one, so I have 2 left to do for Mitzi, but I'm not going to talk about that one quite yet. So now we just have 8 more books to talk about. So because September for me is series September, 4 of the 8 are part of series. So let me start with those ones. I did read Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. I listened to this on audio. This is the sequel in the duology that starts with Strange the Dreamer. In Strange the Dreamer, we follow Laszlo Strange, and this book just kind of continues his story. Honestly, I wasn't really into Muse of Nightmares. It just continues the story. We follow Laszlo and Sarai, and neither of them are who they were at the beginning of Strange the Dreamer, so I feel like talking about this too much will spoil that first book. But this is a fantastical world. There are gods and god spawn, or children of the gods. There are special magical abilities, different kinds of abilities. People kind of trapped in their trauma with their abilities, and a little bit of high stakes involved, a little bit of romance, a little bit of adventure. I just honestly didn't care that much. I think I ended up giving it 3 stars. I think I was too far removed from having read Strange the Dreamer. I didn't have any kind of attachment to the characters because it had just been so long. I didn't even really remember very much about the first one. I might have done myself a disservice by that if I had gone back and read a very spoilery review or something like that. That might have helped, but I didn't do that. I just wanted to cross another series off my list, and I did, but I didn't really love it. So this is, first of all, it's not typically what I read. It's YA fantasy. That's not usually my go-to genre. I have loved some in the past. This one just wasn't a hit for me. I wouldn't not recommend it, but I wouldn't recommend it either. So it's kind of middle of the road. One that I absolutely loved is Nature of the Beast by Louise Penny. I'm just really loving this series so much. This is book 11, I believe. Each book has its own mystery, but there's this overarching storyline as well, and that had ended. So this is kind of picking up after that storyline, and is going to lead us into the rest of the book. So there's hints of like aftermath kind of that overarching storyline, as well as the story in this one as well. This one is a little tough because the person who dies is a kid, and so that's the murder mystery surrounding a young boy who had found something in the woods, but he's a little boy who often made up stories and cried wolf ultimately. And so then when he came and was telling the truth about something that he saw in the woods, people didn't really believe him. But then the consequences of them not believing him is that he died ultimately. And so that was a little bit hard. We're back in Three Pines, which I love. The setting of most of the books in this series takes place in this small Canadian town. And what I love is the relationship between the main townspeople that we get to see in all of the books, and the way that they support each other. And even though some of them are quite different, one of them has a very a potty mouth, and she writes really beautiful poetry, but she's a rough around the edges kind of character, but they all really support and look out for each other. And I do love that. I love Armand Gamache, our detective in here, and Jean-Guy, his right-hand man, and the other people in the Sûreté that he works with. I really love that. This is the first book that has a different audiobook narrator. The first 10 books had the same narrator, but unfortunately he passed away. And so now this is being read by, I forget who, but he's on Downton Abbey. So that's kind of fun. I always listen to my audiobooks sped up, so their voices never sound like the way their voices sound anyway. So it didn't really make a difference to me. And I think I had left enough time in between the two books because I loved Ralph Cosham, the first narrator. And I'll put the name of the guy who narrates the rest of the series. I think he did a great job, but I also think that he's British and these take place in French Quebec. I don't know, but he did okay. I was into it. I didn't have any problems with the narration whatsoever. So yeah, I really enjoy this series. I will slowly continue making my way through to the end. Another series that I am now caught up with is Keeper of the Lost Cities. I finally finished Stellar Loon. I had been buddy reading this whole series with Amy from Amy's Bookish Life, and we read this one together as well. This was not my favorite, I'll say. Probably 3.5 to 3.5 stars, maybe 4 stars. The end really does bump it up for me, but the beginning of this book was so slow. I feel like we're kind of building up to the last book, which is going to close out the series, book 10. And so I even said it to Amy. I'm like, I hope this whole book is not just build up. There are a few things that happen, and then it does pick up speed quite a bit by the end and has that normal fast-paced intensity. Didn't want to put it down like most of the other books have had for me. But the beginning of this one took a while. I mean, I was nearly halfway in before I was invested. We follow Sophie still with her friends who have different abilities. I mean, we're just kind of still continuing the series. One of them had kind of run away and was hiding in the last book. And in this one, they're trying to decide, is it important now to go get that person, or should we focus more on the other things? Because they're all part of this one organization that's fighting against this other organization. It's kind of hard to describe at this point because it's book 9 and it definitely all follows in a sequence. I still love the friend groups. Sophie, our main character in here, at the beginning, she was still pretty frustrating, quite impulsive, and she's supposed to sort of be the leader of this group, and she wasn't always thinking like a leader and leading like a leader. She was pretty hesitant, but also pretty impulsive and a little bit selfish and headstrong. And by the end of this book, we really did see a little bit of growth in her, which was nice. There's also a love triangle, which has been kind of present over the last few books. And finally, we start to turn in the direction that I wanted right along. And it's interesting to see the way the two boys are described in this one, to different parts of their relationship with Sophie, and how one seems super healthy and one does not seem super healthy at all in the way that they view her. So I thought that that was an interesting contrast. Yeah, I liked it. I still really enjoy this series, and I'm really sad that we have to wait quite a while before the last one comes out. And I'm not going to want to reread. They're all so chunky, but it's going to be a while. So it'll be hard to not want to reread them when it finally is coming. Yikes. We'll see. And then the last series book that I read was a start of a series, and it's a manga series, Spy X Family by Tatsuya Endo. I had heard so many people talking about this. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to get the first one and see what I think about it. And I really enjoyed it. So we follow this guy who is a spy. And for a mission that he gets assigned to, he has to have a wife and a child because he needs to get his child enrolled in this elite private school. But he's not married and doesn't have any kids. So he's like, okay, I'll go get one. So he goes to an orphanage and he decides on this kid that he's going to bring home. And turns out that kid is a telepath. And then they have to get a wife as well. And the woman that he makes this kind of arrangement with is an assassin. And none of them know about their secret identities. So no one knows that the man is a spy. No one knows that the wife is an assassin. And nobody knows that the kid is a telepath. So very interesting. This is kind of just setting up the series. I did put 2, 3, and 4 on hold at my library because this was one evening. It was a little different. I have only read one other manga way long time ago. It's interesting because you read them backwards. So instead of reading right to left, you read left to right. So even on the page, you don't start on the right and read across. You start on the left and read down. It took a little bit for me to get used to how you read it, but I enjoyed the story. I thought it was fun, slightly humorous. The pictures were fun. I am looking forward to continuing in this series. So we'll see how that goes. And then I just have 5 left. Oh, I have 9 books. I've read 21 books. I already returned one to the library. I forgot. I have 5 books left to talk about. So I'll just kind of do this, I don't know, in the order that's on my pile here. Sold on a Monday by Christina McMorris was my 12 books to read in 2023 pick for the month of September. And this was historical fiction told in one timeline, which is a little different. It's been a while since I've read one that doesn't have a dual timeline, but we follow these 2 different journalists who work at the same newspaper. Well, one of them is out taking pictures for an article and sees on this porch a sign that says for sale, and there's 2 boys sitting there. And so he takes a picture of these 2 boys with this sign. It ends up that he's able to write this article, and it turns into a bigger situation. All because of this photograph. We follow these 2 journalists and the outcome of that photo getting printed. And it's set during the Depression in the United States, 1931, and the desperation of some families and what that leads them to. And then this journalist kind of trying to make amends for what happened that was a little bit out of his control, but because of choices that he had made. The other journalist that we follow is this woman who kind of on the outskirts played a part in this picture getting printed. And so she's kind of connected with Ellis. So it's Ellis and Lillian. And so she's kind of connected to Ellis in helping to make amends and restore this family. I felt that this was just okay. I wanted it to pull me in a little bit more than it actually did. It was fine, but that's it. It just was fine. So I gave this one 3.5 stars. Not great, not horrible, but it's off my TBR, and that's what's important. For the Middle Grade March Book Club in September, we read The Miraculous by Jess Redman. I really loved this story. I'm so excited. This is my second Jess Redman. This is her debut, but I had already read Quintessence a couple years ago, maybe 2 years ago. And this one is her debut, and I really loved this. We follow a little boy named Wonder, who right at the beginning, we learn that his little sister, his infant baby sister, had died. And Wonder, his name means miracle, or wonder, right? He calls himself a miracologist. He saw a miracle when he was a kid, something unique about one of the houses in their town near the cemetery, kind of an abandoned house. And so that started him on this journey of recording and studying miracles. So he would look through the newspaper and just pay attention to the world around him. And he started this journal that was his miracle journal. And he kept track of all the miracles that were happening in his town and the people that were around him. But when his little baby sister dies, which is off the page, it had just happened, he doesn't believe in miracles anymore. And he packs away all of his miracle stuff. And he's just really struggling with grief. And so this whole book is Wonder struggling with his grief. He meets a new friend named Faye, who also has just lost someone in her family. And these 2 become friends. And there's this abandoned house, like I mentioned, on the way to the cemetery. And one day they see an old woman on the porch of this abandoned house. And this old woman starts having them hand out letters to different people in the town. It's just an exploration of grief in lots of different ways. Wonder's family in the different ways that his parents deal with the grief, and Wonder himself and Faye herself and their friendships. It just felt like a very realistic exploration of how people respond to grief and how grief affects different people. Grief was almost its own character in the book. Someone mentioned that in our book talk about it on the Middle Grade March YouTube channel. Someone said that grief was almost its own character, and I totally agree with that. But it is a very heavy book. It's so poignant. There are so many beautiful passages just about how grief affects us all so differently, but how there's hope and wonder in the midst of all of it. And I thought that this was lovely. You know me, I love books that talk about grief, and I think that this did it really well. Were there tears? 100% there were tears. Yeah, it was really beautiful. Really beautiful. My patron pick for the month of September was After Story by Larissa Behrendt. This is a book by an Australian author about a mother and daughter from Australia who take a literary tour to England. And so they go to London and start there and then take a tour around. They're part of a tour group that goes around England to different literary destinations, like Jane Austen's home in Chatham. They go to Oxford and Cambridge and Stratford-upon-Avon, where Shakespeare was, Bath, Dorchester. So this book is almost like a travel guide through this literary tour. But the mom and daughter are a little bit estranged. They have a tough relationship. And as they go through these different places, they evaluate and really think about their family and their past and what has brought them to where they are. So it's broken into sections based on each stop of the tour. And then at each stop, we have a chapter from both the mom and the daughter. So we're seeing things from both of their perspectives. There's a little bit of overlap as far as events, but not so much that it got annoying. Like, we weren't seeing the same situations just from two different perspectives. There's a little overlap, but not too much. What I did miss in here was a little more actual dialogue between the mom and the daughter. There were a few conversations, but we're really just seeing them reflecting on things and not actually talking to each other. So I wish that there was just a little bit more dialogue. I feel like it would have made me connect to their story a little bit more. I did really enjoy this. I absolutely want to take this tour. With a couple misses, like there's a couple places I don't necessarily need to go to. So there's a list of all the places that they take, all the stops on the literary tour. Anyways, I enjoyed this. I think I gave it 3.5 or 4 stars. Again, I just was missing a little of that emotional connection between the two women. But I did like how reflecting on these authors and their lives and their work brought up things in their own lives to think about and process through. So I did like the connection there. And I'm so glad that I read this. And this was a gift from one of my patrons who's an Australian. I absolutely am so thankful for that. So glad that I read this. Love the cover. It's very fall, very September. And it fit perfectly in with my reads for the month. It was something a little different, worth the read for me. I hauled this last week. And right at the end of the month, I did read on audio. I listened to Share Your Stuff, I'll Go First by Laura Tremaine. This is 10 questions to take your friendships to the next level. And in this book, there are 10, like she says, 10 questions to ask yourself to reflect upon personally, but also to talk about with some of your friendships to deepen them and broaden them and give you a better, deeper sense of who your friends are. And in this book, so she talks about the question, writes about why that question might be important, what the kinds of things it might open, and then she answers the question for herself. And then encourages you to process through it, journal maybe, and think about it for yourself. And then it's a question that you can ask your friends as well. And then at the end of each chapter, after her essay and after talking about how this could impact you, she has a list of 10 things that kind of relate to that chapter. And I love that because when I first was introduced to Laura Tremaine, it was through her podcast, 10 Things to Tell You, I think was the name of it. And in each episode of the podcast, she had a list of 10 things. And so I liked kind of that throwback to when I first was introduced to Laura Tremaine. So I really enjoyed this. There was one essay I was listening to near the end. I forget which chapter it was, but she was telling about a situation that broke her. I think that's what the question was. What's broken you? Yeah, what broke you? And she was telling about a situation in her childhood that was really tough. And I was driving to go pick up Sarah for our BookTube Besties weekend. And I was driving to DC area to get Sarah, and I just was weeping in the car. I'm like, I need to stop listening to this. It's like messing me up, because it was really emotional. I loved Laura Tremaine just feels like a friend sitting down talking with me. I'm glad that I have read a nonfiction. It's been a while, it feels like. And this is a book that I will keep on my shelves. I did listen to this on audio. The audio is not very long at all, and it's great. She reads it herself. But I do feel like it's one that I can return to and use for some reflection time and to think about things and possibly underline some stuff. Like, it was really poignant, and I really appreciated her perspective in here. And finally, the last one that I read was Practice Makes Perfect. This is the book that I read while on my Besties trip. And I did read this in print, and it is the sequel to When in Rome by Sarah Adams. This was super cute. We followed two characters who were in When in Rome. One of them is the sister of the love interest in When in Rome. So Annie, I believe is her name. And then it's also the male interest is the bodyguard of Ray. The main female character in When in Rome is a pop star, and one of her bodyguards is the main love interest in this one. It's kind of a fake dating, kind of a teach her, like, she wants to learn how to flirt. So the bodyguard is known to be a little bit of a playboy. That's he's gorgeous, tattooed, little bit of a bad boy vibe, except is he really a bad boy? But he is tasked by Ray, Amelia, to teach Annie how to flirt. She wants to learn how to date. She comes across as very introverted, awkward on dates. And at the very beginning, we see her on a first date that just goes so horribly. Oh man, it's so cringe. It's so horrible. And so she wants to learn how to be a little bit more free and a little more open. Her friend Amelia tasks her bodyguard to teach her how to date. Of course, they already have a strong attraction to each other, and so that just becomes a little bit more difficult as they try to set up boundaries and rules about this new relationship, which obviously doesn't work, right? So I really like Sarah Adams and her writing. This is another one that is very closed door, and you don't get a lot of details, but the chemistry between them is on point, and their banter, and you just feel the tension building as the book goes on, which I really enjoy. So that was another fun read, and it completes another duology. So check for another finished series. Although I could tell in reading this one that the door is open for a third book in the series. I already know which of the sisters it will be and who the love interest will be. I already know if there's another book, that's who it's going to be about. So as of right now, I'm caught up in this series. So here are the 8 books that I read at the end of the month. 9, if you count Practice Makes Perfect. I don't have that one. I would love to chat with you about any of these books. Did you agree with me on my thoughts about them? Did you disagree? Did you add any to your TBR? I would love to chat about anything along those lines in the comments. I always love connecting with you down there. Thank you so much for watching today and spending some time with me. I appreciate you being here, and I look forward to talking with you in another video very soon. Bye.